all the challenges that must be overcome and the pitfalls avoided if we are to succeed. But we are absolutely determined to tackle this crisis head-on. The previous government, of course, took a different view. Not only did they fail even once to meet the 300,000 homes a year target they set themselves, but in a forlorn attempt to appease their anti-house building backbenchers, they consciously and deliberately chose to exacerbate the housing crisis by making changes to national planning policy that have contributed to plummeting housing supply. Mr. Speaker, we know that the changes required to start putting things right will be uncomfortable for some. We know we will face resistance from vested interests. But this Labour government will not duck the hard choices that must be confronted in order to tackle the housing crisis, because the alternative is a future in which a decent, safe, secure and affordable home is a privilege enjoyed only by some, rather than being the birthright of all working people. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to the changes we are making to the framework today. We received over 10,000 responses to our consultation, alongside which my officials and I have held extensive engagement with private house builders, affordable housing providers, local authorities and other organisations from the sector. The views shared with us have been invaluable in helping refine our initial proposals so that we're able to introduce an effective package of reforms today. Before I set out a number of important areas in which we have made changes, let me touch briefly on some of the proposals that we intend to implement unamended. First, we have reversed the anti-supply changes introduced by the last government almost exactly a year ago. From the abandonment of mandatory housing targets to the softening of land supply and delivery test provisions, the policies that gave local authorities the freedom to plan for less housing than their nominal targets implied are no more. Second, we have made explicit the importance of growth-supporting development, from labs to data centres to supply chains and logistics. In the same vein, we have made clear that the default position for renewable energy deployment should be yes. Third, we strongly promoted mixed tenure developments, reflecting the robust evidence that attests to the fact that they build out faster and create diverse communities. Fourth, we have made a series of changes to bolster affordable housing delivery and enable local authorities to determine the right mix of affordable housing for their communities. This will support our commitment to deliver the biggest increase in social and affordable house building in a generation. Mr. Speaker, there are then 4 important areas where we have refined our proposals. Let me turn first to housing targets. As we made clear when launching the consultation in July, restoring a mandatory standard method for assessing housing needs is insufficient if the method itself is not up to the job. So, as the House will know, we proposed a bold change, increasing the total annual national target from 300,000 to 370,000, ending the reliance on decade-old population projections and removing the arbitrary 35% urban uplift that resulted in a skewed national distribution, disproportionately focused on London to the detriment of the rest of the country. We fully intend to maintain the level of ambition outlined in July, but we heard through the consultation a clear view that we should do more to target housing growth on those places where affordability pressures are most acute. We've therefore made the method more responsive to demand, redistributing housing targets towards those places where housing is least affordable while maintaining the overall target envelope. Next, let me turn to our reforms to the Greenbelt. Mr. Speaker, as you will know, ours is a brownfield-first approach to development. As a result of a number of targeted changes we are making to the framework and our proposals for a brownfield passport, we are prioritising and fast-tracking building on previously developed urban land wherever possible. But we know that there are simply not enough sites on brownfield land registers to deliver the volume of homes that the country needs each year, let alone enough that are viable and in the right location. So in the summer, we propose that local authorities should take a sequential approach to releasing land to meet their housing need. Brownfield first, followed by low-quality land in the Greenbelt, and only then higher-performing land. To identify low-performing sites, we proposed a definition of Greybelt land that reflected the fact that there are areas currently designated as Greenbelt which contribute little by way of aesthetic, public access or ecological, received broad support through the consultation. But a strong desire was expressed to limit the room for subjectivity. We've therefore set out a clearer description of how to assess whether land meets the definition of Greybelt, and we will be providing further guidance to local authorities in the new year to support them with Greenbelt reviews. Mr. Speaker, at the centre of our Greenbelt reforms lie our golden rules. These are designed to make sure that where Greenbelt land is released, the public derives real benefit from development on it, including more affordable housing to meet local need. In the consultation, we proposed a flat 50% affordable housing target, but recognised that because land values vary across the country, the limited use of viability assessments should be permitted. Through the consultation, we've recognised that this approach risked uncertainty. If flexibility was needed in some parts of the country because land values were lower, the precise amount of affordable housing to be secured would become a protracted site-by-site negotiation. And if a local authority did not allow flexibility, there would be a risk that sites were rendered unviable, with the result that no houses, affordable or otherwise, would get built. So our final policy takes a different approach to managing variation in land values. Rather than a single 50% target, we are introducing a 15% percentage point premium on top of targets set in local plans, up to a maximum of 50%. And because that means the target itself will be responsive to local circumstances, we will be restricting the ability for site-specific viability assessments until such time as we have amended viability guidance in the spring of next year. Being pragmatism over purity, the golden rules we are putting in place today will give communities the confidence that they will be met and will maximise the number of affordable homes delivered across the country. Mr. Speaker, another area where we've made changes is to the presumption in favour of sustainable development. The presumption sits at the heart of the National Planning Policy Framework and means that where a local authority has underdelivered or an up-to-date local plan is not in place, the balance of decision-making is tilted in favour of approval. We are determined to ensure that where the presumption applies, it will have real teeth. But at the same time, we are clear that development consented through it must be consistent with the clear requirements in national policy relating to sustainability, density, design and the provision of affordable homes. The changes we have made deliver on both these fronts. Finally, Mr. Speaker, in the consultation we sought views in respect of how our changes applied to local authorities at an advanced stage of plan making. Our proposed transitional arrangements aim to strike a balance between maintaining the progress of plans at more advanced stages of preparation while maximising proactive planning for the homes our communities need. The core of our proposal, that we only hold back a draft plan where there is a significant gap between the current proposed housing requirement and the new housing target, was well supported. However, we are making three changes. First, we've taken on board concerns that the transitional period was too tight, and so we will provide local planning authorities with an extra 2 months to progress their plans, extending the transitional period from 1 month to 3. Second, and again responding to an ask we heard repeatedly from councils, the transitional arrangements will apply where the draft housing requirement in the plan meets at least 80% of local housing need, rather than the numerical 200 homes threshold we originally proposed. In these instances, the plan will not be held back. Third, where plans are adopted under these arrangements, and where there are existing plans based on the old targets due to run for a number of years yet, we want to see the level of ambition raised sooner rather than later. As a result, from the 1st of July 2026, we will expect authorities with the plans adopted under the old standard method to provide an extra year's worth of homes in their housing pipeline, helping to accelerate the delivery of new homes. Mr. Speaker, we recognise that we are asking much from many local authorities, and we're determined to support local leaders trying in good faith to deliver homes for their communities. That is why, across dedicated local plan funding, the planning capacity and capability support announced at the budget, and income from raised fees, we will be injecting more than £100 million into the system in the coming year. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, we are confident that the revised framework we are introducing today will support significantly higher rates of house building and sustained economic growth. We've listened carefully to the views expressed in the consultation and have adjusted several areas of policy accordingly. Now it is for others to do their part. Developers must turn supportive words into action, bringing forward new sites and building them out at pace. Local authorities must embrace the challenge of higher targets and push for more and better development in their areas. Mr. Speaker, we have moved fast. We have not held back. We have not shied away from controversial decisions, nor wavered in the face of those who've sought to chip away at our resolve. With focus and determination, we've pushed on to ensure we are putting in place a planning system geared toward meeting housing need in full and unleashing economic growth. Change will take time, homes are not built overnight, and our dire inheritance means that the climb out of the trough we are in will be a steep one. But by implementing this revised framework today, we've taken another decisive step toward a future in which everyone will enjoy a decent, safe, secure and affordable home in which to live. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Kevin Holding-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank him for advance sight of his statement? And can I first of all welcome the ambitious target 1.5 million homes in this Parliament? Can I just say, I think the Minister may have unintentionally misled the House regarding the dire inheritance he claims. This side is rightly proud of our record in housing delivery. 2013 to 2023, really, was a record level over the last 50 years in terms of housing, new housing formations, greater than any other period since the 1960s. We delivered 550,000 affordable homes since 2010, including 63,000 in 2022 and 23 alone. What we do not welcome is the war on rural England he is pursuing. Following on the family farm tax, the withdrawal of the Rural Services Delivery Grant, now we see the massive shift, mass house building in rural areas and on Greenbelt. We do not welcome the bulldozing of democratic accountability. We do not welcome the lowering of housing targets for urban areas, including a 20% reduction in London, who are already missing their targets by 50%. And we do not welcome an average doubling, a 100% increase for predominantly rural areas. The reality is, for local residents in areas like Westmoreland, Cumberland, North Yorkshire and the home counties, the residents will one day wake up to realise that they will face targets of up to 600% increases. They will call their local councillor to ask them to oppose a specific application and be shocked at the response. I'm sorry, we no longer have the right to vote against an individual application. They'll be even more shocked if they become aware of what Labour said in opposition. Their opposition motion of the 21st of June 2021 called on their government, this government, the previous government, to protect the right of communities to object to individual planning applications, something that he is now taking away. Wow. They'll be more shocked again when they become aware that the Minister himself used that right in 2021 to object to an application for 1,500 homes on a brownfield site in his constituency. And indeed, the Secretary of State also used that right to object to a development in her constituency in 2017. Same old Labour. Do as I say, not as I do. The reality is that they will fail to deliver on their target. And don't listen to me, listen to the CEO of Homes England, who has admitted in a leaked email that it is a two-parliament objective rather than being deliverable in this Parliament. The Centre for Cities or the Office of Budget Responsibility have both said they'll only deliver 1.1 million homes in England in this Parliament. And indeed, across the UK, only 1.3 million homes, which is lower than we delivered in the last Parliament. Another broken promise from Labour. As the Leader of the Opposition said, therefore, we will still be there for him, though. We'll be there for him and be there for the Secretary of State when she fails to deliver on that promise. This planning framework pushes development in rural areas, concreting over greenbelt, green fields and over our green and pleasant land, rather than focusing and supporting building in urban areas where we need to build the most. And to what end, Madam Deputy Speaker? Due to the loosening of restrictions on the visa requirements, such as the salary threshold and the scrapping of the Rwanda deterrent, the majority of the homes they deliver will be required for people coming into this country rather than from British citizens. Labour has also consistently failed on affordable homes. Under the London Labour Mayor, new affordable housing in Labour is down by 88%. Well, across England, the Conservative government delivered over 500,000 homes. See that they've already weakened their requirement for 50% affordable homes on the Greenbelt by allowing the use of viability assessments. This change will mean fewer affordable homes. The Labour government has already failed first-time buyers. The Conservative government doubled the number buying every year compared to 2010 by means of the stamp duty discounts, Help to Buy, Right to Buy and our Affordable Homes to Purchase programmes, some of which help the Secretary of State herself get onto the housing ladder, all now axed by this socialist government, pulling up the housing ladder. They are going to build over rural areas while claiming it's grey belt land, where we delivered over 1 million homes in the last Parliament alone. But it is vital even more that we build in the right places with the right infrastructure. But the Prime Minister has already admitted that he will bulldoze through the concerns of local communities. If Labour really want homes to be built where they are needed, they must think again. Can I finish by asking him, how many of his 1.5 million homes will be affordable homes? What target does he expect will be the split for social rent, affordable rent and affordable homes to purchase, particularly given the use of viability assessments? On planning capacity, could he set out why his resourcing of planning authorities, which we broadly welcome, has risen from £20 million in his manifesto to £46 million in the budget to £100 million today, and how is that consistent with the budget? Why is he deliberately making it more difficult for first-time buyers to buy a home? And what percentage of the £1.5 million target does he expect will be needed for immigrant households?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I thank in some parts the honourable gentleman for his response and for those questions. And I'm glad he broadly supports the government's target of 1.5 million homes. It's, as the honourable gentleman will know, Madam Deputy Speaker, the previous government's target that they didn't once in 14 years achieve, that 300,000 homes a year target if you disaggregate it. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, there were so many inaccuracies and misleading statements in that document, a fundamental misunderstanding of the framework we've planned today, that I'm not sure where to start. The assertion that we're waging war on rural England, or that we have distributed housing targets predominantly towards rural areas, is simply wrong. We are focusing. Well, the honourable gentleman might wish to listen to the response and focus on the detail of the framework we published today. We are focusing growth across our city regions. Housing need across MCA areas will increase by over 20% compared to the current standard method. Similarly, on Greenbelt, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not the case that we're allowing viability assessments. I was very clear in my statement. We're restricting the use of site-level viability assessments on Greenbelt release until we've refreshed viability PPG in the new year, at which point we'll consider exemptions for previously developed land and large sites. On local plans, Madam Deputy Speaker, we absolutely prioritise the importance of up-to-date local plans. We've inherited a system from the previous government where we have a less than a third up-to-date local plan coverage. That is unsustainable. We want communities more involved at an early stage, shaping their local plans. That's the best way they can shape development. And he mischaracterises, I'm afraid, our working paper proposals around planning committees. We're simply talking about, as we discussed at length in the UQ earlier in the week, streamlining the planning system, ensuring that trained professional planning officers take the appropriate decisions and members get to focus. And elected members get to focus on the largest and most controversial applications in their site. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not going to respond to the taunt about sites in my own constituency. Any honourable member? Well, because I've outlined my position many, many times before. I objected to a 1,500 home scheme, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I thought was poor quality and we could do better. It's very interesting, I say this to the members opposite, that consent was given many, many years ago. Not a spade has been put in the ground. It is the type of speculative development we need to see less of. We need more plan development through the plan system. On his questions, Madam Deputy Speaker, just briefly, on the proportion of homes under the 1.5 million target that will be affordable, we can't put a precise number on it at the moment for the following reason. We expect to see many, many more social and affordable homes come through developer contributions. Our golden rules that apply to the release of land through the Greenbelt will ensure that proportion rises, that 15% premium on local affordable housing rates. But affordable provision, as the honourable gentleman will be aware, is partly related to grant funding from government, and we'll set out details of future investment at that point in the next year's spending review, multi-year spending review, along with what the successor programme to the Affordable Homes programme looks like and the precise split between social rented homes and other forms of tenure. But we've been very clear we want to maximise the delivery of social rented homes. On planning capacity, Madam Deputy Speaker, details will be set out in response to the consultation. The 100 million figure I cited is the amount of support going in the round to local plan support, planning capacity and capability support and other things. On migration, Madam Deputy Speaker, he knows as well as I do that the majority of homes that developers sell in this country are to British nationals, that most parts of the country have local allocation rules in place and local residency requirements that means that non-British nationals can't access housing, that only those who are eligible for no recourse to public funds can do so. He knows those rules. He's scaremongering. It's beneath him. I know that the honourable gentleman doesn't really believe it, and the House believes it either, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I call the Chair of the Select Committee, Florence Eshalabi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the greater detail on the changes to the NPPF that the Minister has outlined this morning. And he's right, we do have to be bold. As he's outlined, the social housing sector is in crisis. At our recent evidence session on the Select Committee, he mentioned a figure of 160,000 children in temporary accommodation. Those children will be spending this Christmas away from their friends, away from their families. And for the Shadow Secretary of State to reduce this about immigration is wrong. Think about those many children who will be sleeping rough this Christmas. And it's about how we improve the housing and making sure we are building the right housing to help those children. We need more social housing to get people off our waiting list. And our councils are at breaking point, with developers, some of them, using a viability clause as a way of not delivering on that much-needed affordable homes that they've promised. And communities must be able to trust the planning process. So can the Minister please outline and assure that local councils will see a significant increase in the affordable housing programme next year to allow them to meet the government's target on housing crisis? Secondly, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to touch briefly on the land classification outlined in the strategy, which could affect the way in which communities are able to shape those local developments. Too often we see disproportionate impact on high-end developments, which does nothing to help people get on the housing ladder. Is the Minister confident that the update to the NPPF will make sure that new homes also come with some of the improved developments, including schools, GP surgeries and accessible things, so that local residents can see tangible benefits in those developments coming forward in their local area?
Well, I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for those questions and her broad support for the framework we've announced today. On social rented housing in particular, she's absolutely right, Madam Deputy Speaker. The record on social rented homes of previous Conservative government is absolutely dire. The figures speak for themselves. Not only did they not deliver new social afforded homes beyond anything beyond 10,000 units per year, they also engineered the decline of social housing and ran down our stock through various interventions, the slashing of affordable homes programme funding, the increase in the generosity of the right to buy discounts, which my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, did not benefit from. We've returned it to the rates that she did access housing on that basis. But their record on social rented housing speaks for itself. As I've said in relation to future investment in affordable housing and social rented homes, we'll set out details in the multi-year spending review next year. But we do want to prioritise the delivery of social rented homes, given the important role they play in addressing the housing crisis and resolving the particularly acute end of that housing crisis in the form of temporary accommodation. On the NPPF more widely, I can give her those assurances that targeted changes to the framework we've made today will support the delivery of infrastructure. As I've already said, when it comes to the release of Greenbelt land, our golden rules will ensure we get a higher proportion of affordable housing, but also infrastructure and amenities and access to green space through that additional public benefit secured.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Liberal Democrats support the provision of new homes. Somerset West and Taunton, in my constituency, under Lib Dem control since 2019, has approved thousands of new homes, to the extent that the town is now one of the fastest growing in the UK, 9% population growth to 2021, partly because it's such a wonderful place to live, Madam Deputy Speaker. And now Somerset is pioneering the first new council houses in a generation in parts of the county, many of them zero carbon. So we welcome the policy change on renewable energy, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we also welcome the extension in the transitional arrangements, although I would urge the Minister to consider, in exceptional circumstances, a 6-month transition rather than a 3 months, which I know members on a number of benches would wish to see on behalf of their authorities. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, trust in the planning system, like trust in politics, is not where it should be. As with bypassing planning committees, therefore, imposing housing numbers on councils is taking decisions out of the hands of elected councillors, which is taking decisions out of the hands of local people, and that is undemocratic, and we would reverse it. And trust in planning demands that our most precious green spaces, people know, are fully protected. So every authority should have the same level of green belt protection for precious green wedges and green spaces in their areas. So rather than Whitehall diktat, plans for new homes should be led by communities and their councils. And those homes should be genuinely affordable to local people. Councils like Eastleigh have shown how, where those new homes come with the jobs, schools and public transport that's needed, community consent follows. And we won't solve the crisis in care, for example, unless we have the homes for older and vulnerable people supported by the GP surgeries and care services they require. So if any target is to be mandatory, Madam Deputy Speaker, therefore it should be our country's need for 150,000 new social homes per year, and for low-cost home ownership through options like rent to buy to give people a real foot on the ladder. And that should be funded from capital borrowing, just as Labour and historically Liberal governments funded our stock of council houses in the past, including use of compulsory purchase, before Conservative governments sold them off hand over fist, until soon there will be almost none left. So rather than diktats of top-down planning, risking a surge in speculative greenfield permissions of the kind the Minister is concerned about, for homes out of the people's reach, let's instead, Madam Deputy Speaker, fund, incentivise and focus on the social and affordable homes that we need. Zero-carbon homes that tread lightly on the land, restoring nature and, in doing so, restoring trust in local people and the councillors they elect to take the decisions that most affect them and their communities.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm not sure I detected a question there, but there were several points, and I will endeavour to respond to at least a few of them. I welcome the honourable gentleman's broad support for the framework and, in particular, renewable energy deployment. On the charge that we're bypassing local democracy, local communities, I refute it entirely. We are encouraging, in a way the previous government did, the adoption of up-to-date local plans, which are the best means of shaping development in any particular part of the country. That is where local people and communities can get involved to determine what development looks like and where it goes. But it must be a conversation about what development looks like and where it goes, rather than whether it happens at all. And the system we've got at present, as a result of those changes to the National Planning Policy Framework in December 2023, as a result of the fact we have less than a third up-to-date plan coverage, is too much speculative development outside of plans that communities are rightly taking issue with. Madam Deputy Speaker, just briefly on social rented homes. I've said this to the honourable gentleman before. Until he comes up with a less vague way of funding 150,000 social rented homes, we simply cannot take the point seriously. The Liberal Democrats got away with this through the election. No spending totals for that housing in their manifesto. I applaud the ambition. We take a more realistic path to boosting social and affordable homes, putting forward only what we know we can deliver within the spending constraints that we face. And lastly, just briefly on CPO. I absolutely agree with him that we need to reform how CPO works. We're taking forward the discretionary power to disapply hope value that the previous government took through, and I commend them for doing it in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. We need that power tested, but we need to go further, and we intend to do so in the forthcoming Planning and Infrastructure Bill.
After 14 years of neglect, indifference and at times just downright obstruction by the party opposite, housing in Newcastle is the #1 issue. It's the #1 issue constituents bring to me, and my inbox is full of heart-rending stories of families unable to put a roof over their children's heads. So I welcome this statement, and I look forward to working with Newcastle City Council to build out the homes that my constituents need so much. And on that, could he just offer a bit more detail on how he will ensure that these homes are of the quality that my constituents deserve, and the infrastructure, particularly schools, that they need will be built out alongside them?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that point and that question. And she's absolutely right. The party opposite can try to scrub the record all they like. It speaks for itself. The so-called planning concern group in the last Parliament, I remember these debates very well, Madam Deputy Speaker, convinced the previous government to make changes to national planning policy that allowed local areas to plan for less homes than their target required. And what that has meant, Madam Deputy Speaker, is a rush of plans coming in under number, some of which we've got to undo by changes to this framework. On her question in particular, as I said, we are making targeted changes to the framework today to support the delivery of infrastructure provision. The government also supports essential infrastructure, particularly in those areas that are most unaffordable, through a range of spending programmes. But when it comes to infrastructure-led development and quality, which are changes to the presumption for sustainable development in the framework today support, we are absolutely determined that this is not just a rush to 1.5 million, regardless of what the units look like. They must be well designed, they must be quality units, we must have the infrastructure, amenities and services that communities need to thrive.
Select Committee Member Gagan Mahindra.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Housing Minister will be aware, Three Rivers District Council, which has been Liberal control for many, many years, does not have an up-to-date local plan, and there is already a presumption for development. What will the Minister say to those councils that choose either not to have a local plan in place or are unable to meet the housing targets?
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for that question, and it's a very well-made one, because we are absolutely determined to drive up the coverage of up-to-date local plans. We want universal coverage. That is the way we get sustainable development that communities can have confidence in, because they've been able to shape it. Those areas which refuse to engage, we will take appropriate action. We're setting today a 12-week deadline for local authorities to come forward and tell us a timetable for how they intend to put local plans in place through various measures around the transitional arrangements and how this new 6-year housing land supply will bite. We think we can incentivise local authorities to come forward and put those plans in place. Where they don't do so, though, I say this, Madam Deputy Speaker, we won't hesitate to use the full range of ministerial intervention powers at our disposal. The previous government put deadlines in place and let them slip repeatedly. We will not make the same mistakes. We are going to ensure that up-to-date local plans are put in place so that we end the proportion of speculative, out-of-plan development that, as I said, communities across the country are rightly taking issue with.
Select Committee Member Joe Powell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the statement, especially on affordable homes, after the dismal numbers under the party opposite. Those 1.3 million people on the waiting list deserve a voice in our planning system too, and I only wish the party opposite would recognise that. Specifically, can I ask the Minister to update the House on his approach where there might be multiple local plans in place, so for example with the London plan and London Borough plans, and how those targets may be worked out between those different plans?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As my honourable friend may be aware, the new method produces a figure for London of nearly 88,000. This is more than double recent delivery. It is the biggest proposed percentage increase against existing delivery of any region in the country by a significant margin. We expect London to step up. We expect London to step up and improve its housing delivery record. In terms of his specific question, it will be for London and the Mayor to look at how the aggregate local housing numbers are distributed across the whole of London. So in a way that can't be said for other parts of the country, because there is a spatial plan in place in the form of the London plan, the targets for individual London boroughs need to be viewed in that context.
Select Committee Member Lewis Cocking.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Nothing in this statement outlines the new powers councils will get to make developments infrastructure first, like building roads, schools and GP surgeries before new housing. Can the Minister outline what powers my local councils of Broxbourne and East Herts will get to make developments infrastructure first, but when these massive new housing targets are forced upon them?
Well, what I'd say to the honourable gentleman is that local authorities are already required to put in place plans for infrastructure delivery, to set out how that infrastructure is funded and should come forward. We have made a number of targeted changes to the framework today to support the delivery of infrastructure. We know this is not the last word in terms of our reforms to the housing and planning system, and we're considering what more we can do to ensure that we get infrastructure up front on developments in the ways communities want.
Nessel Chalisker.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Barking, 1 in 4 households are privately renting, which is higher than the national average. 40% of them are homeowners, which is 20% lower than the national average, and temporary accommodation is through the roof because of the housing crisis. My constituents in Barking will welcome the government's steps to make sure we address the housing crisis. Does the Minister agree with me that often it is viability that is holding up development schemes that are shovel-ready, but because of land value, they just cannot get on and be built? And therefore, infrastructure commitment that the government is making, 6 to date since the general election, is critical. And can you give reassurances that the government will deliver infrastructure so that we can ensure land values increase and viability can be met so those homes can be built?
Well, my honourable friend raises a very good point. Viability is an issue in many parts of the country. It is stalling development in lots of areas. We need to look at what support can be put in place on particular schemes. Our New Homes Accelerator, for example, that we looked at, is providing support, planning capacity support, other forms of support, to look at some of the reasons some of these schemes, particularly large schemes that are consented or near consented, are being held up. But as I've said in the House before, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're giving further thought into how we examine these issues and what more we can do in particular to ensure that consented schemes are built out in good time.
Wendy Morton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This centrally driven intervention drives a coach and horse through greenbelt areas such as Aldridge, Brownhills, and also through local democracy. So I'd like to ask the Minister, how will he ensure that local communities are respected and that they have a voice so that we can build the right homes in the right place?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for that question. I'd return to a point I've made several times during this statement. The onus is on local communities and elected leaders to put up-to-date local plans in place that shape where development is to take place. I know from many previous conversations with the Honourable Lady, she wants to see Brownfield first development, so do we. We've put in place a number of targeted changes in the framework published today to support the delivery of brownfield sites. We've also consulted through a working paper, a soft consultation, on proposals for a brownfield passport to further accelerate and fast-track brownfield development. Local areas can look to bring forward brownfield sites to densify those brownfield sites, but at the point they say there aren't enough of them, or they cannot work cross-boundary with other neighbouring authorities, we are saying to them, please look to the release of low-quality land within the Greenbelt.
Toby Perkins.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I salute the energy and commitment of my honourable friend to these targets. It's great to see it supported by the Prime Minister. The Environmental Audit Committee are looking at the new planning framework and the environmental consequences of that, and I'm pleased to see that there have been changes since the original consultation to strengthen those environmental protections. Can you say a little bit more about how we will ensure that nature isn't the victim of this passionate commitment he has? And can you also say on brownfield sites, often brownfield sites are very biodiverse, and often achieving the biodiversity net gain alongside all of the other commitments simply means that these sites don't become are not profitable. Can you say something about how we're actually going to make sure these brownfield sites can be viably brought forward, both by the private and the public sector?
I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for that question. He's right, we have made a number of changes to the framework to further strengthen the references to climate mitigation and adaptation. We've made a number of other changes relating to flood risks, relating to sustainable drainage systems and how we can support those through the planning system. On BNG specifically, I'm more than happy to have a detailed conversation about the thinking we're doing about how we to successfully roll out BNG across the country and make sure it works, not just on large sites but on small sites too in particular.
Sir Roger Gale.
Deputy Speaker, in his statement, the Minister referred to the undermining of the capacity of our great towns and cities to realise their economic potential. Does he not realise that by effectively absolving the Mayor of London from his housing responsibilities, what he's actually doing is exacerbating the problem of inner London boroughs, such as Lewisham, and dare I say Greenwich and Woolwich and others, from using the green fields of Kent as a dumping ground for their housing problems. We are fighting a rearguard action to try to protect our farmland from development in the interests both of our countryside, but more importantly, perhaps, sustainability. The Minister refers to brownfield sites. What he's actually announced today is the undermining of the Secretary of State's right to rule on final planning issues after they've been to the Planning Inspectorate. She will now have no credibility at all.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've got a huge amount of time for the right honourable gentleman, but I think that sort of hyperbole is beneath him, if I may say so. We're not absolving the Mayor of London of his responsibilities. The previous government put in place a system where the 35% arbitrary urban uplift did not apply merely to the core of a city region, as it does in every other part of the country, but to every London borough. And that produced a fantastical figure that was completely divorced from reality. We've abolished that urban uplift. We've reset the standard method. It still leaves London with an incredibly stretching target of 88,000 homes per year. This is more than double recent delivery. We want to work in partnership with the Mayor of London, but we will be pushing the Mayor of London to increase his ambition and delivery in terms of what can be achieved in London. But on agricultural land specifically, Madam Deputy Speaker, we place great importance upon it and food production. The National Planning Policy Framework is clear and remains clear that where significant development of agricultural land is demonstrated to be necessary, areas of poorer quality land should be preferred to those of higher quality. Those protections remain in the framework.
We have 35 colleagues, Bobby. The questions are getting longer, as are the answers. Can we please keep this short? Matthew Patrick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the Wirral, our housing shortage sees thousands on waiting lists. And the issue goes further, with children and grandchildren having to leave the area to get on the housing ladder. On the Wirral, we want to build quality, affordable houses in the right places. We share the government's approach to building on Brownfield first. What steps can his department take to support Wirral Council in achieving that?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for that question. I'd refer him to my previous answers in terms of the targeted changes we're making to the framework to strengthen expectations around brownfield development. The proposals we're consulting on at a very early stage through a working paper on a brownfield passport, seeking to explore how we go further to prioritise and fast-track the development of that land. But absolutely, we want to work with local areas to look at perhaps where brownfield sites might be densified and how we can get the majority of development, where possible, through that route.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to refer the House to my register of interests. Mid Sussex District Council has a local plan and it's well advanced in making its next local plan, which significantly got cross-party support from Conservatives, Green and the Labour councillor. We also have a design guide. We're delivering 1,000 houses a year, and last year that included 300 social and affordable homes. We are an example of what good planning looks like, and we're even investing in purchasing our own temporary accommodation. I'd like to invite the Minister to come to Mid Sussex and see what good planning looks like for himself.
I'm afraid I won't be able to give one, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I will add it to the list of requests for visits that I receive across the House. But I commend her authority for the focus on quality and on good design. We want to see more of that come forward across the country.
Speaker, just to clear my interest as the Vice President of the Local Government Association, and I welcome the commitment to overall house building targets, and you can't hit a national target without clear local targets. Particularly welcome the commitment to social housing. Would he confirm that's social housing and not affordable housing, which the opposition spokesperson mentioned? There is a very big difference there. But if we are going to concentrate on brownfield sites, viability there is lower. 1 of 6 contributions will be lower. Therefore, when he has conversations with the Chancellor, will he make the point that to deliver social housing and the numbers needed, she might have to reconsider the amount of social housing grants she provides? Yeah.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. He has real expertise in the area. We are making a distinction between social rented homes, the most affordable type of affordable housing, if you like, and we've sought to express that through a change to the glossary in the framework that separates out social rented housing through other forms of housing. He's right on brownfield delivery, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker. It does involve additional challenges. We're very cognizant of those, and we're exploring how the variety of government funds that support delivery of brownfield sites might be improved as we go forward.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister has alluded to one of the challenges there is on planning permissions, namely that any one day there's something like 1 million permissions for new housing that are not built. Yeah. Developers ration the supply in order to keep the price high. Mm-hmm. So will he consider, which I think he did in opposition, a principle of use it or lose it? Because what happens is developers will get permission, then sell it on, sell it on, sell it on, until viability means they can't develop it. But if the planning permission can be brought forward, or they don't use it in time, then actually we could get the houses and homes that people want.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. He has great expertise in this area, like my honourable friend who asked the previous one. He will know that local authorities already have powers to issue a completion notice to require a developer to complete their development if it's stalled. To bring greater transparency and accountability in this area, we're seeking to go further and take the necessary steps to implement build-out reporting. But I am giving a lot of attention, I can assure him, to what more we might do on build-out, because developers have made commitments to increase the pace of build-out across the country. We need to make sure they follow through with that.
I'll take an example with a short question, Barry Gardner.
I congratulate my honourable friend on his statement today, and in particular the importance he's placed on the presumption in favour of sustainability and getting design of a development right. He's a champion for the natural world, and I'm aware that he is sympathetic to the need to include biodiversity measures in all new builds, such as swift bricks, which are an essential nesting habitat for the survival and recovery of cavity nesting birds. So would he provide the much-needed boost that they need for this declining population, which has sadly been placed on the critically endangered red list? And will he ensure that such simple requirements are not just in the NPPF, but are translated into the National Development Management Policy to ensure they have statutory weight?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend will be pleased to know that we have added text to the NPPF to encourage the incorporation of features to protect threatened species, including swifts, but also bats and hedgehogs. We will consult on NDMPs, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the spring of next year.
In my constituency of Mid-Dorset North Pool, we're seeing a doubling of the size of the town of Wimborne, with new homes built on 3 sides right up to the Stour, which are pretty much out of reach of local people. But they come with no infrastructure. There was supposed to be shops included in one development. Developer claimed that they couldn't get filled, and so now we have another care home. And all the while, Aldi have now put a planning application in on a greenbelt site where everyone will now need to drive to it. What can the Minister do to force developers to deliver the infrastructure they promise so developers can't play the system? Minister.
I thank the honourable lady for that question. There are measures in the framework which will help the objective she seeks. I share it. We are also committed as a government to strengthen the existing system of developer contributions so that we hold applicants to the promises they make as part of Section 106 agreements, and also arm councils to be able to negotiate with them in the first place.
Jessica Toll.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My local authority area, BCP, submitted its draft local plan in July for examination, but under the new targets, it has planned for only 53% of its housing need. So can my right honourable friend elaborate on the steps government will take to work with local authority areas at this stage to make sure they fill that significant gap?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. In the consultation, the formal government consultation the formal government response to the consultation, which will be published at the end of this statement, we set out very clearly how we're dealing with local authorities in advanced stage of plan preparation, those that will meet that Reg 19 stage, those that don't, how we help those who do have up-to-date plans top up their housing supply so they come closer to the new standard method. But I absolutely share her wish that her local authority takes steps to close that gap.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Speaker, will the Minister reaffirm the principle of infrastructure first in order to get homes built? In Tendring and Colchester, we're planning to build the 9,000 home Borders community project, but that can only go ahead if the A1331 is completed, and it has to be funded.
Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question. I support the objective, absolutely. I would say very gently, the government had 14 years, the previous government, to address concerns in this area. I remember repeated calls from government benches at that time to get serious about this. We will. There are measures in the framework that support infrastructure delivery, but there's more work to do.
Warinda Jess.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Minister's statement today. Last week I met one of my constituents, Mr Anwar Hussain, who lives with his wife and 5 children in a 2-bedroomed house. His 8-year-old autistic daughter needs her own bedroom, the doctors have told him that. And Mr Hussain tells me that he has been on emergency banding for 2 years for a larger house with more bedrooms, and he's still waiting. Does my honourable friend agree that we desperately need to improve upon social housing, and can he please confirm that the government's plans will help people like Mr Hussain?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for that question. It sits slightly outside of the framework, although, as I've said, there are targeted changes in here to support the delivery of new affordable homes. But he's absolutely right. When it comes to the decency of the existing social housing stock, we do have to do more. We'll be consulting on a new decent home standard in the new year, as well as introducing AWAB's law to clamp down on the most severe hazards.
Neil O'Brien.
Labour's new housing targets for Harborough increase it by 40%, and for Erdby and Wigston they double it. And yet we can see that the overcrowding problem is worse in our urban areas, and we can see that the gap between population growth and housing growth is worse in those areas too, and we can see the environmental arguments for it too. And yet the Minister today has announced that the new target for London is about 11% lower than the old one. And we saw that in the original round of numbers, Nottingham was down 21%, Birmingham and Leicester were down 31%, Coventry was down 50%. Can the Minister tell me what the numbers are for the cities in the Midlands now? Are they all still going down, even as our targets are going up?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I think he slightly misunderstands the situation with urban authorities. The housing targets are going up across metro areas. The cities, we've dropped, as I said, Madam Deputy Speaker, been very clear about this, the arbitrary 35% uplift introduced by the previous government that bore no relation to housing need. Metro area targets are going up. He will find out, in terms of the specific targets that have been produced by our redistribution of the formula within that envelope, what the new numbers are for his 2 local authorities.
Adam Jogi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I listened to the Minister on the radio this morning, and I've listened to his statement today, and I welcome his comprehensive steps to tackle the housing crisis. But I do want to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that whilst I work with colleagues across the House, and those opposite will know that I did think the Shadow Minister's speech was beneath him, and that's not the kind of gutter politics we should be engaging with. And now, that said, I must say to the Minister that as we seek to tackle the crisis, we must do things with people, not to them. And so can I gently say to him that communication and engagement is going to be vital to getting this right? And can I invite him to confirm from the dispatch box for constituents in Newcastle and Line that productive agricultural land will not be the default in his Brownfield first approach to development?
No, as I made clear in response to the right honourable gentleman earlier, the approach to agricultural land, as set out in my response, remains the case. Ours is a Brownfield first approach. We want to maximise delivery on Brownfield first wherever possible. Only when that type of delivery can't come forward, where brownfield sites cannot be densified, where cross-boundary strategic cooperation of the kind we intend to introduce is not possible, are we asking local authorities to review their greenbelt with a view to identifying and releasing the lowest quality, poorly performing land within it.
Sir John Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The honourable gentleman is a thoughtful and diligent minister who I know shares my disdain for the identikit, soulless, ubiquitous housing estates that have been built during his lifetime and mine. So in welcoming the NPPF's commitment, and I quote, to design codes that provide local frameworks for creating beautiful and distinctive places, will he write to every local authority, making it clear that design is a key planning determinant, an absolute salient, and will he also write to the planning inspectorate to ensure that when local authorities turn down an application on the basis of poor design, the inspector will back them up?
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question. Well-designed places do remain at the heart of planning policy. There's an entire chapter of the NPPF, as you will know, that remains devoted to well-designed places. And the changes we're making to the presumption today will ensure that when it comes to national policy on design, those expectations need to hold in the balance of decisions that the planning inspectorate make. But there's much more we can do outside of policy. In the new year, my department will bring forward updates to the National Design Guide and National Model Design Code. And as part of those changes, we will certainly make clear our expectations when it comes to what local authorities can do in this area to improve quality and design.
Chris Curtis, who I should have called earlier as you're a select committee member. My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thanks to the failure of the party opposite, over 150,000 children are going to be waking up on Christmas Day this year in temporary accommodation. I have to say, if that is a record to be proud of, I have absolutely no idea what would make the members opposite feel any shame. But can I get two reassurances from the Minister? Firstly, that we won't see chopping and changing because business needs certainty. So we won't see the chopping and changing that we've seen from the party opposite, and we will stick by these policies. And secondly, it's not just about the planning rules, it's also about capacity within our local councils. So can he please tell us what he's going to do to speed up the process of getting more planners into our planning committees, into our local councils to add capacity to that system? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for those questions. We do need consistency in terms of national policy. We had too many changes to the national planning policy framework under previous governments. It's our intention for this to be the big change in terms of substantial policy development. There will come a point next year, Madam Deputy Speaker, when we look to consult on NDMPs, where we have to make changes to the framework to account for the evolution of those. But as I said, this is the big changes we intend to make, and for them to hold and be delivered upon through this Parliament. In terms of local planning capacity and capability, I made reference in my statement to the £100 million worth of funding in total that's being injected into the system, in particular as part of the transitional arrangements to help those authorities who will fall foul of the requirements set out in the framework today.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a former house builder, I know some of the challenges about viability. And I welcome the Minister and the Government's focus on affordable housing targets, viability assessments. But it is, Minister, a basic mathematical calculation with regard to affordable housing that 20% of something is better and more than 50% of nothing.
Somewhat cryptic statement there, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think the point he's driving at perhaps is related to golden rules. I would say one of the changes we've made, for example, that puts pragmatism above purity is dropping that straight 50% requirement across the country and looking at how we can get more locally sensitive rates by putting in place a 15 percentage point premium on local affordability housing types. We think in the round that will provide more certainty but also maximise the delivery of homes coming through that route.
Sean Woodcock.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I refer to my register of interests. Chilwell District Council's housing waiting list quadrupled over the past decade under the Conservatives. It's one of the reasons why addressing the housing crisis was one of the priorities I made to the people of the Banbury constituency during the general election. I think we all recognise that planning reform that the party opposite ducked during its time in office is crucial to fixing the housing crisis. Yet does the Minister also agree that it's crucial to helping us get the growth that we want in our economy, which is good for businesses, whether it's sandwich shops or high-tech engineering firms across the country?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and he's absolutely right. It's not just the housing crisis and what it's doing in terms of blighting lives. The situation we're in at the moment, as I said, an acute and entrenched housing crisis, an ailing planning system, is holding back our economy, is holding back our great towns and cities in terms of how they are maximising their potential. This is a growth-focused national planning policy framework, and we're very proud of it.
Unless questions are kept short, colleagues just won't be able to get in to think about everybody in the chamber. Sir Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know that the Minister is a man of considerable integrity, so can he be honest with my constituents that the combination of mandatory targets, a massive increase in those mandatory targets, and the fig leaf of the grey belt policy means that in a constituency like mine, which is almost entirely green belt apart from that which is developed on, this will mean massive new development, an expansion of London sprawl, and a change in the character of the area forever.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his compliment at the outset there. I don't agree with him for the following reasons. We are not abolishing the green belt, we're preserving the green belt. We think it has played a hugely important role over recent decades, not least in checking unregulated urban sprawl. In terms of his own constituency, I don't know, and I say this to him gently, how he can know what the definition of grey belt is. We've just published it. He doesn't know how much grey belt land there is in his constituency. But in parts of the country like his, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd say the answer lies in cross-boundary strategic planning so that we can sensibly plan for housing growth rather than every local area having to account for those numbers on its own.
Mark Ferguson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as it's already been said in this debate, there are 1.3 million people on the social housing waiting list and 160,000 kids being temporary accommodation this Christmas. But the number of under 30s who own their own home is half what it was in the last generation. Half. Does he agree with me that it will take serious and sustained action over the course of this Parliament and beyond to turn that around?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and quite contrary to the crowing of the honourable gentleman about the party opposite's record on home ownership rates are stagnant, and for the younger generation they are particularly bad. We have a generation locked out of home ownership. We're taking action in that area, not least through our plans to take forward a comprehensive and permanent mortgage guarantee schemes. But at the heart of why housing is unaffordable, it's not the only contributory factor, but it is a large one, is our failure over many decades to build enough homes of all tenures. That is what this framework will support going forward, that 1.5 million new homes target.
Rebecca Paul.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Government has announced that housing targets for Reigate and Banstead will increase significantly. We will move from an advisory target of 644 houses per year to a mandatory and completely unrealistic target of 1,264. This is a 96% increase, and I should note a large proportion of my constituency is Greenbelt. If all areas must play their part in building the homes we need, why is the Minister reducing housing targets for London and other urban areas whilst increasing them in rural areas like mine?
I've made clear the point on urban areas and how the 20% increase across the board. We're asking more of all parts of the country. If I say gently to the honourable lady, she speaks as if there is no housing pressures in her constituency. People want homes in her constituency to rent, to buy, as much as in any other part of the country. And I think those targets, yes, are stretching. They're achievable. They're achievable either through brownfield development from the release of low-quality grey belt land within the green belt, or through cross-boundary strategic planning.
Joe Morris.
Speaker, and representing a very large, very rural constituency, I'm constantly contacted by families who are concerned that their youngest generation is having to leave Northumberland in order to find the homes they need. Just one example of the party opposite's war on the countryside. Can the Minister confirm to me that this is the only way that we can get the homes that are needed, that are appropriate, into our rural communities, so that a generation is not forced out of rural Britain?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and just to make completely clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, the reforms to the planning system we're making today are not the only part of the answer. Delivery of homes is an entirely different challenge than bringing forward planning permissions, but we do need to oversupply planning permissions into the system to get the number of homes we need in his constituency and across the rest of the country.
Claire Young.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wrote to the Secretary of State in November concerned about the impact on local authorities such as South Gloucestershire that are at an advanced stage of bringing forward plans to deliver much needed homes. So I welcome the extension of the transitional period, but I remain concerned that areas whose figures have increased will be vulnerable to planning by appeal while they get the new consents lined up. Will the Minister explain how authorities that are doing the right thing will be protected from their strategy being wrecked by speculative applications while their plan goes through the process to adoption?
I thank the honourable lady for that question. I gently say to her, the expectation of having an up-to-date local plan in place is nothing new. Authorities have known for some time that they should be doing it, and it's, I think, a failure of the previous government not to use the powers at its disposal to ensure that there is more up-to-date local plan coverage. So those areas that have not got up-to-date local plans in place will be vulnerable to development taking place outside of the plan process, but we're absolutely committed to support those who share our ambition, who are working in good faith to get a plan in place, to be able to do so.
Mike Reader.
Deputy Speaker, could the Minister set out how the announcements today will help our SME house builder market and also bring forward more sites suitable for SMEs to develop?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's more to be done in this area, and I think SMEs and small sites can make a huge contribution to the 1.5 million home target. There are changes being published in the framework today that will help SME builders, not least that focus on mixed tenure sites that we know build out faster and where SMEs can play a big role going forward.
John Whittingdale.
The Minister is intending to impose thousands more houses in my constituency when there are already not enough school places, not enough doctors and congested roads. Can he at least look at ways in which financial arrangements can be established which would mean that developers can be made to fund infrastructure necessary ahead of house building and sale rather than waiting for months and possibly years after its completion?
I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for that point. As I've said, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are giving a considerable amount of thought to what more we can do, in addition to some of the changes being made today, to ensure that the right infrastructure comes forward. I'm happy to give the point he makes a serious consideration.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister knows, because we've discussed this before, that my constituency of Dartford is a place already getting on with the challenge of building new homes. Ebbsfleet Garden City, the first garden city in 100 years, aims to build 10,000 new homes over the next decade, with 50 new parks and open spaces, as well as a network of green corridors. And I'm delighted that the Minister's confirmed he'll be visiting shortly. What I would like to know from him, if possible, is what more we can do to up the levels of affordable and social housing in new developments like Ebbsfleet, so everyone has the chance to live in them.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, Madam Deputy Speaker. I look forward to my visit to Ebbsfleet. It is now building out at a faster rate than it was, and we welcome the contribution it's making. I've already referenced the changes we intend to make to strengthen the existing developer contribution system to get more out of Section 106 agreements. There is more we can do in this area, and of course, as I've already referenced, government investment into affordable housing will bring forward more details in the spending review next year.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituency, Cheltenham, is already built up to its boundaries and is working with its neighbours on those joint local plans the Minister has referenced, in part to deal with a housing waiting list of more than 2,500 bequeathed to us by the past government. Now, we also have a big sprawling town centre and plenty of empty space, so I wondered what the Minister's message is to councils that have that kind of combination of challenges.
The Honourable Gentleman for his question. I'm pleased that his area is working in cooperation with its neighbours. We have a duty to cooperate, as he knows, in place at the moment. It hasn't been particularly effective, and we think we need to go further when it comes to strategic cross-boundary planning. But to those parts of the country that wish to densify their town centres, we fully support that. Open to any conversation about particular areas about what more they think needs to come forward for allow them to bring forward plans to rejuvenate town centres, to bring more residential development back into them.
Always slightly out of my eyesight, but Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In reply to an earlier question, the Minister spoke of streamlining the planning system. In my 26 years as a councillor and 14 years in this House, I've heard successive governments talk about streamlining the planning system, by which they mean taking more central control. It results in frustration amongst ward councillors, frustration amongst their constituents that they feel that they're not able to participate properly. And it also results in frustration by government because in effect they fail to meet their targets, as I'm sure this one will. Would the Minister accept that one way of involving local communities other than in the local plan is to allow local councillors to work closer with their communities and actually have some influence over individual major developments, in which case you get better quality and you meet your targets a lot quicker?
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his question. Where appropriate, of course, local councillors, along with advice from trained planning officers, should have a say on major applications, outline applications. Some of the proposals we're asking for views on, we're asking for nothing more than views at an early stage, Madam Deputy Speaker, on a working paper, is ensuring that we get planning officers taking the right decisions, using their expertise, and members focused on the largest and most controversial development. I don't know whether the Honourable Gentleman has ever sat on a planning committee, but can he say hand on heart that every reserved matters application, as technical as some of them should be, should come to full planning committee? We think there are ways to streamline the system that don't involve the removal of local control, that adhere to that plan-led system philosophy that we take forward and value very much.
Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for his statement. Across this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, we clearly have an ageing population. And I believe there's a desperate need for a dedicated apartments for those of the over 55 age group, which would free up by its very nature those homes back into the market, and also social housing as well. So will the Minister consider having discussions with the Cabinet Minister and perhaps with I could suggest the Northern Ireland Assembly to secure funding for the over 55 complexes that are needed not only in towns but also in rural areas as well? Thanks so much.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. The previous government, as he may know, and again I commend them for it, appointed a task force, an older people's housing task force, to look at options for the provision of greater choice, quality and security of housing for older people. That task force recently published its report, a series of recommendations that we're engaging with. But we do need to give serious consideration about how the planning system evolves to take into account demographic changes that we know we need to adapt to.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I suggest to the Government that this subject really warrants a full-day debate, not just a statement Q&A. But for now, may I just ask one straightforward matter? Can I ask again that he look carefully at the relatively small number of places, including East Hampshire, where you have a planning area which is part in and part out of a national park? And when you look at the case, the housing targets should be set separately for those two parts of the planning area.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for that question, and he raises a very important point. There are local authorities around the country where the boundaries are such that they stray into areas where environmental protections are in place, national parks and other things. What I would say to him is these housing targets that we're bringing forward, these mandatory housing hire targets, that local areas will need to engage with when coming up with local plans. Those local plans will be tested by the planning inspectorate to see whether there are hard constraints of the type he speaks to, and therefore whether a plan is sound on that basis. So hard constraints will still be taken into account in the development and examination of local plans.
James Wild.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And in an earlier answer, the Minister confirmed the Government supports an infrastructure first approach. So will he work with colleagues in the Treasury and Transport Department to ensure approval of A10 West Winch Housing Access Road funding, which is essential to unlock thousands of homes which are in the local plan on the edge of King's Lynn?
The honourable gentleman's request has been put on the record, and I'll make sure my ministerial colleagues are made aware of it.
Ever patient Ben Oxyjective.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister today launched the MPPF in my constituency of Huntingdon at Alconbury Weald. But this development was planned and built under the previous government, and phases 2 and 3 will see a further 4,000 homes. Significant brownfield development at scale, but nothing to do with the revised MPPF. It's a shame the Deputy PM didn't travel the extra couple of miles down to the environmental waste incinerator approved by the Minister on her behalf against local wishes a couple of months ago. But the Minister talks about guaranteeing infrastructure, and when I asked the Government about a new East Coast mainline station to support the 6,500 homes at Alconbury Weald, the Government fobbed me off with talk of an internal review. So how will the MPPF unlock the infrastructure that large developments desperately need?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd refer the honourable gentleman to my previous answers on that point.
Well, no doubt the Minister's been in the Chamber for well over an hour, and he'll know the strength of feeling towards this subject because it's taken so long to talk about building homes. I'll give the front bench a short moment to swap over very quickly for the next statement. We come to the second statement, Outcomes and Qualifications Reform Review, and I call the Minister Janet Davey.
With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will now make a statement on the outcomes of the review of qualifications reform at level 3. The priority for this government is to build a skills system which will drive forward opportunity and deliver the growth our economy needs. The post-16 skills system in England that we inherited from the previous government fails both these tests. In particular, the qualifications landscape is too confusing and fails to provide the clear routes to success needed by learners and employers. We heard strong arguments that the last government's plan to remove level 3 qualifications and to limit the flexibility for schools and colleges meant they risked leaving students with too little choice and too few opportunities. This year, we paused the defunding of qualifications and have undertaken a review for those qualifications to have funding removed, to see where we need to retain alternative qualifications, such as applied general qualifications or BTECs, and to consider how long we will need to keep them in place. We undertook extensive stakeholder engagement, delving into the detail of qualifications with employer representative bodies, colleges, practitioners, awarding organisations and industry experts. We recognise that certainty is very important to education providers, to students and to their parents and indeed guardians, and I would like to reassure the House that our decisions make the position clear up to 2027. We are clear that students deserve high quality qualifications that meet their needs and that we must continue to develop and improve qualifications so that they provide for the needs of students and employers. The curriculum and assessment review will be taking a view on qualifications in the long term as part of the wider consideration of how we prepare all young people for life and work. But there are some areas where we need to act in advance of its recommendations. The first change we will be making is that we will not tell providers and students which types of qualifications they can and cannot mix together. It should be for colleges and sixth forms to work with students, employers, mayors and higher education to devise the best mix for individuals and deliver the skilled young people that their local economy needs. We will therefore not be applying the previous proposed rules of combination. They are confusing, a number of qualifications in the system, and through the review we have already identified over 200 qualifications with low or no enrolments, and we will remove funding from these in line with already published dates. This gives students and employers a simpler range of qualifications to choose from. T-levels provide an excellent qualification option which should be available to more learners, and we've introduced 3 new T-levels this September. A further T-level in marketing is to be introduced from September 2025. It was fantastic to see the energy generated by the year's T-levels week, which highlighted the huge benefits that young people are gaining from T-levels and their enthusiasm for the qualification. The unique industry placement aspect of T-levels is a real draw for students and is something all too often is not offered by other qualifications.